Okay, welcome back. Here we are at IDAH2O's Module 6. This is the final stream assessment in our workshop. It's the biological assessment. Now you can follow along in the IDAH2O handbook. The assessment form, as with the others, can be downloaded from this module, from the IDAH2O website, and is printed on pages 47 to 48 of the handbook. Water is essential for all life to exist, and our water bodies support many living things. Stream habitat, chemistry, and physical attributes affect what life can live in the stream, and to some extent vice versa. IDAH2O's stream biological assessment focuses on the life that tells us a story about the water quality in the stream. Many living things don't tell us much about the health of the stream. Wildlife, for instance, rely on clean water and the habitat that streams provide, but they move about broadly, using many streams throughout the year. Fish, too, rely on cold, clean water, but they travel far along stream reaches. Fish don't have narrow pollution tolerances, and some fish populations are threatened, endangered, or are otherwise protected, so we leave these alone. Aquatic plants have wide-ranging pollution tolerances and are difficult to tell apart without further training. Microscopic life, like diatoms, algae, plankton, and cyanobacteria, can tell us something about the water quality, but we don't provide microscopes with the IDAH2O monitoring kit. We do ask if you have seen the evidence of fish and other vertebrates. If you can identify them, great, please do, and add that information in the comments section. The form asks you to estimate the presence of aquatic plants covering the stream bed in increments of 25% and the stream bed area. The form also asks for an estimation of algae cover on the bottom, again in increments of 25%. IDAH2O primarily focuses on the aquatic macroinvertebrates that inhabit almost all water bodies around the world. I would call them bugs, and many of them are indeed bugs. But all the snails, worms, freshwater mussels and clams, crawdads, leeches, planaria, or flatworms, and limpets would all feel very left out. These are also important inhabitants of our streams. So I use the term aquatic or benthic macroinvertebrates to describe the broad category of indicator organisms that tell us so much about the quality of our streams. It's a big word, but it contains a great deal of meaning. Aquatic means that they live in or near the water all of their lives. The word benthic means bottom dwelling. Benthos, again, is a fancy word for the mud under the water. Both of these are commonly used for the aquatic organisms that inhabit the little spaces amongst rocks and other sediment in the bottom of our waterways. Macro means large enough to be able to see and identify the organisms without magnification. While having a magnifying glass is helpful to see them better, most of these can be identified with the naked eye. Invertebrates are animals lacking a backbone. In fact, invertebrates have no bones at all. They may have an exoskeleton, like a beetle, but others, like worms or leeches, have no skeleton at all. So, why focus on these little critters? Well, these organisms are ubiquitous. That is, they are found almost everywhere that water is found. They also don't move around very much. They are stable in their range, even though some will hatch and fly around to find a mate and lay eggs. Each type has a narrow window of water quality that it can live in. Most pollution-sensitive macroinvertebrates have a narrow window of habitable water quality. Others, primarily the pollution-tolerant types, have broader ranges of pollution tolerance. When we see many of the more sensitive macroinvertebrates in a water body, it is a good sign that the water is clean, or clean enough to support diverse life. However, keep in mind that the absence of pollution-intolerant macroinvertebrates in a water body does not necessarily indicate the water quality is poor. Other natural factors, such as temperature, flow, sediment, and more, may explain their absence. Pollution tolerances have been rigorously researched. As water conditions change, the macroinvertebrate community that lives there changes too. And they're easy to catch with very basic equipment. Many can be observed with no equipment at all. Just turn over rocks in the stream to find some types clinging onto the rock. You can use the small plastic bin included in your kit to swish off the bugs off of rocks and leaves. Just add an inch or so of water and swish off any bugs you find on any sort of stream substrate. About catching them. IDAH2O does not supply stewards with a net, but you can make a homemade net with scraps of window screen. The softer fiberglass type is best, and a couple of pieces of scrap wood like dowels. Many types of bug nets are available online or in retail stores. Some aquarium nets are entirely suitable for IDAH2O monitoring purposes. The little 3 inches by 10 inch size nets are okay, but the 4 by 3 or 8 by 6 inch are sometimes easier to catch more bugs in. These aquarium nets are inexpensive and are super easy to store and pack along with your IDAH2O kit. Higher quality pond nets and seine nets are also available online or in retail stores. A pond net has a long handle and is sometimes referred to as a D net because of its shape. I have a long-handled, round, fine mesh fishing net that I got from a local sporting goods store for less than $13. Now, the professionals use more rugged but also more expensive nets. A really good seine net will cost well over $100, but will last a professional for years. A professional level pond net will set you back at least $75. Educational grade nets are available too, and are a little less expensive and a little less rugged. Use whatever type of net you'd like, as long as the mesh is fine enough to catch the littlest of the bugs. After you catch them, these organisms are easy to identify down to the order or class level. IDAH2O doesn't try to identify them even as far as the genus level, let alone species. An identification key is printed on pages 49 and 50 in the handbook and is downloadable from this module and from the IDAH2O websites. Many other identification keys exist out there on the internet and are easily found and downloaded. Each monitoring kit contains at least one laminated identification key attached to the clipboard. You can print additional versions on Write in the Rain paper or have regular print shop laminate printouts of the identification keys. You don't need any sort of fishing license or collection permit, except in the state of Pennsylvania, to simply catch bugs and then return them to the creek. If you are collecting crayfish with a trap, then you'll need a fishing license, but not if you're just using a bug net or turning over rocks. IDAH2O has an Idaho research permit for capture and study of crayfish. If you're planning to continue your aquatic macroinvertebrate education into the River Miles Crayfish Observation Research Project, we will provide more information for you then. It is important to try to catch as many different types of macroinvertebrates as you can with each assessment event. Try your luck in as many of the habitat types and microhabitats as you can access through your stream reach. The IDAH2O Biological Assessment Form will ask you to check all the microhabitats that are present, and then a second check for those you were able to sample. It is suggested that you complete a biological assessment twice a year at relatively low water levels. The lower water makes it safer and easier to access all the habitat types. The macroinvertebrates will be at larger life stages later in the season, making it easier to identify them. Also, limiting the number of assessments reduces your impact on the stream. By kicking around the rocks, trying to knock the bugs into the water column, you are creating a disruption, though greater disruptions naturally happen during high water. We simply try to limit our disruption during these lower water times. We classify the macroinvertebrates into 3 pollution tolerance groups: pollution intolerant in clean water, moderate pollution tolerance in somewhat polluted water, and pollution tolerant in polluted water. So, let's get started with identifying a few of the macroinvertebrates within each pollution tolerance group. You don't need to memorize anything. This is just to get you used to the idea of looking at the physical characteristics of the macroinvertebrates to help you identify them. Pollution intolerant macroinvertebrates need cold, clean, clear water. They are intolerant of almost any pollution, which will drive them to other areas, or they might die out altogether to be replaced by some more pollution-tolerant species. Stream ecologists will assess a stream's quality using an EPT index. It's named for the 3 common pollution-intolerant macroinvertebrates: Ephemeroptera, or mayflies, Plycoptera, or stoneflies, and Trichoptera, or caddisflies. High-quality streams will have each of these families of macroinvertebrates and likely multiple species of each family. The more the better, as species richness of intolerant macroinvertebrates is a strong indicator of a very clean stream. Mayflies are called ephemeroptera because they are ephemeral. Mayfly larvae can live in the stream for months and sometimes even more than a year when they morph into adults. Often happens all at once, creating a cloud of frantically flying mayflies called a hatch. If you spend enough summer nights or mornings by a stream, you will surely encounter a hatch of these frantic mayflies, trying to quickly find a mate and then lay eggs back in the water before they run out of energy. Adults do not have mouthparts to eat. Macroinvertebrate hatches are an important method of lifting nutrients out of the water and back into the forest. Some bugs are blown away from the stream and into the forest where they decompose back into the soil. Others are eaten by birds or bats and redeposited as guano, again fertilizing the trees. A few do manage to successfully lay eggs back into the stream they came from before they die. These adults might only live for an hour. Few live more than one day, and then they are gone, hence the term ephemeral. When not in flight, mayflies hold their wings together above their body at an angle. Stoneflies have a similar life cycle, but the adults can live for a couple of weeks. You will sometimes see their old shed skins on rocks and vegetation that sticks up out of the water. When not in flight, stoneflies hold their wings flat across their back. Caddisfly larvae often create a protective case using little substrate pebbles or bits of vegetation and silk-like material, though some are free-swimming and a few spin a spiderweb-like net. They jettison these cases when they hatch into a moth-like bug that you often see flying around the porch light at night. Caddisfly adults can live up to a month, and when not in flight, hold their wings tented above their bodies. Other commonly found aquatic macroinvertebrates in clean streams include riffle beetles and gilled snails. Gilled snails open toward the right, it's called dextral, as you hold them in your hand with the tip pointing up. These snails rely on gills for gas exchange, and this requires cold water with high concentrations of dissolved oxygen. There's another type of snail that's found in polluted water. We'll get to that in a little bit. Riffle beetles are less than a quarter-inch long and walk slowly underwater. They can swim too somewhat. Other pollution-intolerant macroinvertebrates include water penny beetles and Dobson flies, which are often called fish flies or salmon flies or hellgrammites. Moving on to the somewhat pollution-tolerant or middle water quality macroinvertebrates, these are often found in warmer, slower, or standing water and water bodies with somewhat lower dissolved oxygen or increased nutrients, but still without too much pollution. Many of the common pond bugs fall into this group. Damselflies and dragonflies are some of the most commonly found Group 2 taxa. These feed on mosquito larvae and other macroinvertebrates while in their own larva stage in the water. They hatch and fly away, continuing to eat bugs. They can live for months as adults. Lots of different types of beetles inhabit slower streams and ponds with medium water quality. Backswimmers and water boatmen are very common. Crawling water beetles, whirligig beetles, and predaceous diving beetles are often found in ponds too. Now some of these can bite, so it's best to handle them with forceps or a plastic spoon. Water striders, sometimes called water skimmers, and water scorpions also need slower water. Freshwater mussels have always been an important food source for the Coeur d'Alene and Nez Perce tribes. These do not tend to attach to a substrate, but instead exist on the bottom of the stream. If you do find mussels that readily attach to anything solid in the water, let me or the Aquatic Invasive Species Program know, as it might indicate a new population of an invasive species. Crane flies look like long, elongated worms with a hairy end. These hairs are usually a type of gill. Crane flies turn into those big gangly flies that some people call mosquito hawks or mosquito killers. They don't have anything to do with mosquitoes, but sort of look like a giant mosquito. A handful of crane flies are not aquatic and instead live in grassy areas, which can damage turf and lawn. But most of them are aquatic and cause no harm at all. Aquatic sow-bugs are closely related to terrestrial sow-bugs, which we often call roly-polies. Scuds are like tiny freshwater shrimp and swim along on their side. There are a few freshwater shrimp, but most of these were introduced as natural fish food, and many have disrupted some lake ecosystems. Finally, crayfish, also known as crawdads and crawfish, and sometimes mudbugs, are common in many streams farther down away from the source. They need more stability in stream substrate, flow, and temperature. These can get really big in larger rivers and lakes. You are more likely to catch small ones in the 10 to 20 centimeter size. Idaho has 3 native species of crawfish: the signal crayfish to the north, the Pelouse crayfish in southwest Idaho, and the Snake River Pelouse crayfish in southeast Idaho. Non-native invasive species are moving in from other areas, including the virile, or northern crayfish, the rusty crayfish, and the red swamp crayfish. Limpets look like half of a freshwater clam, but are actually a type of snail with a dish-shaped shell and a strong foot that hangs onto rocks. Now, I don't find these very often, but they're out there. Finally, pollution-tolerant macroinvertebrates can live almost anywhere. These organisms can tolerate low dissolved oxygen and high levels of various pollutants. You can and will find pollution-tolerant organisms in clean water. It's not like these critters like pollution. It's just that they can tolerate any level of pollution. In clean water, however, pollution-intolerant macroinvertebrates typically outcompete most of the pollution-tolerant macros. Aquatic worms are the most commonly found type of Group 3 taxa. Worms can live in water with almost anoxic conditions. These are genetically almost identical with earthworms, but somehow live in aquatic environments. Leeches, too, can live in low dissolved oxygen waters. Many are scavengers, and some suction themselves to a fish or an unlucky master water steward and use a small tooth to roughen the skin surface like a rasp. It then consumes body fluids that leak out. You can safely just pull a leech off and toss it back into the water. Planaria, or flatworms, look a lot like a leech, except they don't suction on or consume body fluids like leeches. They also have a triangular head. Now, if you cut a flatworm in half, each half will grow into a complete flatworm. Mosquitoes can live in terribly polluted water and are able to float at the surface and absorb air from the surface. Midges and blackflies look similar and are often found in large numbers in slower water. A few beetles, like scavenger beetles, are found in poor water quality. Rat-tailed maggots are rare in most areas of North Idaho, but are quite common in stagnant, impaired water bodies and wastewater ponds in southern Idaho. Lung, or pouch snails, shells, open to the left as held upright with the opening facing the observer, called sinistral. These snails can live in anoxic water by emerging to the surface, grabbing a pouch full of air, and then descending back to the water. Now, after you are done collecting and identifying macroinvertebrates, please note how long you spent collecting and identifying the macroinvertebrates. Also note how many nets you used and approximate length of stream that you collected from. Okay, that's all for now for the stream macroinvertebrates. Move on to the quiz, and there's only one final module to complete, number 7, which includes standing water, aquatic invasive species, and final wrap-up. I'll see you there.